Thriving in a Virtual Work Environment, sponsored by FLY, Asian Network at Yale, Diversibility at Yale, the Yale Latino Networking Group, and the LGBTQ Affinity Group. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Our distinguished panelists represent fellow Yale colleagues who have adapted to this current work context and will share their strategies to be applied to your own approach. The panelists will discuss how to stay motivated in this environment, suggestions for balancing work and personal life, especially as those become increasingly intertwined, and how to continue to grow and make progress professionally. Victoria, I'll turn it back to you to introduce our panelists.
Excellent. And so let me go through our panelists here today and give you a sense of what part they make up of in our Yale community. So first we have Alexandra Apolloni, who is the project specialist in the FAS Dean's Office, providing support for the Tzu-Tzu program and other FAS initiatives. We also have Tzu-Tzu Benigni, who is an IT manager on the Enterprise Reporting and Analytics team, which supports reporting and analytical tools such as Power BI and Tableau. And Beth Luoma, who is the Assistant Director of the Faculty Teaching Initiatives team at the Ford Center for Teaching and Learning, and conducts consultations, observations, and workshops for Yale instructors, focusing on everything from active learning to assessments. And to give you a sense of our format today, we're going to kick things off by asking you, our audience, a poll question. And we'll have another poll question or two throughout the session. We'll intersperse some prepared questions for our panelists with an opportunity for you to pose questions for them to answer. So as we move throughout the session, please populate any questions you want in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, since we'll be pausing throughout the session to address some of those questions. We'll try and do our best to address as many of them as we can. And again, welcoming your questions throughout this whole session today. All right, so first things first, we want to hear a little bit from you, and I'm going to launch a poll question to that end. You should now see on your screen a poll question asking you about your current work situation. Please take a moment to read through this question. I'll read it aloud as well. Please indicate which situation is most like yours, and you can click more than one. That you are working primarily virtually but expect to return to campus in the next 3 to 4 months. You may be working primarily virtually with no announced or anticipated return date, or you may be working on campus and collaborate with coworkers that are working virtually. We recognize that not all of these may be your precise situation, but do want to hear which is closest to what you're currently working with. I'm going to give another 10 seconds or so for you to answer this question. Okay. Thank you so much for your responses so far. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing those responses so you can see how everyone has answered. So you'll notice, and this is really good food for thought as we move through our session today, that for a lot of you, 77%, you are working virtually, and that it's unclear when precisely you'll be returning to campus. There's also a strong proportion of you, 15 and 15 each, who are either working virtually and anticipating a return to campus, or who have some kind of current on-campus component to your work, but may be working with those who are in the virtual environment. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing results here. Thank you for your responses. And from here, as we consider this context, I'm going to pose a few questions to our panelists before we stop for some Q&A from yourselves. All right, so I'm going to start off with Alexandra here. Alexandra, for many of us, the nature of our work changed in the remote context. And for you, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how your work changed. And I know that for you, it wasn't just necessarily moving to the remote environment, the logistics changing, but also how you were thinking about the nature of your work and what faculty in turn needed in this new context. Could you share a little bit about your perspective there?
Sure. So my position involves running the Scholars as Leaders, Scholars as Learners program for the Faculty of Arts and Science. And this is a program that provides support to faculty in a variety of different ways. And the goal of the program is to help faculty become leaders, to help them advance their research, and different kinds of support along those lines. And prior to the pandemic, a lot of our programs were in person, but we had to really shift focus with the shift to remote work. So back in March, we had been essentially on the verge of launching a new faculty leadership institute that we had envisioned as kind of a year-long in-person program that would incorporate coaching and workshops and opportunities for faculty to gather. And we essentially had to completely mothball that program and shift focus with the move to this kind of virtual reality that we're now living in. And for me, there was kind of a moment of loss there. We were ready to launch something that we had been planning for a long time, that I was very, very excited about, and suddenly that was no longer going to be possible. And so my approach in moments like this is to think about like what I can be doing. I'm the sort of person who always needs to be kind of creating something and building something. And so I kind of took a look at what was possible, what the new needs were among faculty, and thought about like what can we be doing right now that isn't going to replace what we had hoped to be doing, but can still fill a need and can support faculty in different ways. So what we ended up doing is over the summer, we ran a series of virtual faculty writing retreats. So we kind of developed a plan for faculty to be able to convene as a community, find support that way, and also kind of move their writing along and move their research along at a moment when doing that was very, very difficult. We expanded our faculty coaching program because that was something that could happen remotely. And so over the summer, I think we had about 60 different faculty participate in one-on-one coaching. And we've introduced a series of other workshops that have taken place remotely. And I think all of this kind of pivot that we did required really thinking about like what was most necessary for people right now in terms of what we could do to support them. A lot of the needs didn't change, they just became more acute. So women faculty who have children, that their needs were suddenly kind of intensified. So we were thinking about, how can we respond to that group of people in particular. Faculty who are on the tenure track and were worried about kind of moving their research along, all of a sudden it was more difficult for them to do their research. So what kinds of coaching initiatives could we introduce that would respond to that? Community became a big piece that I think not just faculty, but all of us have felt has been difficult to kind of grasp hold of in the kind of virtual environment. So we've introduced new coaching groups and opportunities for people to kind of come together. And so for me, kind of doing this work, finding a way to sort of be useful in this moment has been really meaningful, and finding a way to kind of the act of refocusing has given me a lot of sort of motivation to keep doing the work and kind of keeping on.
Thanks for that great response, Alexandra. And I know there's a lot to dig into there, and already seeing a question come up that we'll address in just a few moments after we talk to Beth and Tzu-Tzu. But moving on to Beth for the moment, I wanted to ask you, there's been a recently conducted survey by Forbes showing that 46% of workers feel isolated from their team, and a reported 30% admitted that it's challenging to collaborate with their colleagues in this context. For you, how important do you think communication is in this virtual environment? And do you, for instance, take an approach of using multiple mediums to communicate with your colleagues, or any particular tools that you yourself use and could recommend?
Thanks, Victoria. That's a great question. I also just want to thank Fly in general for organizing this event and bringing this conversation together. Hopefully this is a means of communicating and a means of forming community here today too. I feel like it's cliche to say that communication is of the utmost importance. I'm also coming to you from a center, Victoria described that I work at the Poor Review Center, that is highly collaborative in nature. And so to move from a place that, if you've been to the Poor Review Center before, it's, in Sterling Memorial Library, it's open space, open office, all of our staff members kind of flowing in and out together, it was very easy to pass someone in the hall, stop by someone's desk, ask that quick question and interact in that way, which is very different when we're suddenly confined to boxes on Zoom screens. So what does it mean to interact? So I think something that the Porphyry Center has been great at doing is to be very intentional about that collaboration. And I've seen it occur center-wide, I've seen it occur within teams, and then we can also think about our individual interactions. And I think that really alludes to the tools that Victoria was describing, that I think selecting that tool, it's so important to think of the purpose of the tool and what goals you're trying to accomplish in your communication to really work well together. So a few examples that have worked well in our environment, and I say work well meaning that they've evolved over time because we've all been growing and learning how to do this together. One is prior to our time with COVID, we had been using Zoom chat a little bit as across the Porphyry Center. There was a Porphyry Center channel for Zoom chat where people would share a quick question or idea or resource. That has been used much more heavily now, and we've now broken down into team Zoom chats or like project Zoom chats. We're collaborating on this specific thing. How I found that helpful, and this is kind of my personal preference, is in the remote environment, you may feel more of the email burden. So if you can find ways to ask that quick question in Zoom chat and not continue to flood our inboxes, that's, again, it's by preference, and you want to have an open conversation about communication, which is meta to the utmost degree, but to ask, would it be easier if we kind of reduce email burden together and have those quick questions? I would have stopped by your desk, just do that by Zoom chat. I know other teams are using Slack. We've also had success using Microsoft Teams, especially when it's a really well-defined project. So it's really interesting because communication is always so important for how we collaborate together. It always has been, and being direct and explicit in communication is so important. But when we lose some of the cues of body language in a room, of general vibe, some of the data we can usually leverage to understand what's going on, I think that direct communication is all the more important. And an extra nudge too, that if there's something that is on your mind in terms of how things are working within a team, it's all the more important now to voice that, to advocate that. You may have been a little bit more reserved in terms of doing that in the past, but I think the longer that festers in the remote or virtual environment, the more harm it can cause. So that's kind of a very jumbled answer and exploration of tools, but I think the summary is communication is important. And it's important to communicate with each other about how we're communicating to be the most effective.
Definitely not jumbled, a lot of great information, but also ideas and strategies in there, even approaching the concept of communication and thinking about it intentionally, because you have to in this environment, is really helpful. Tzu-Tzu, moving on to you, I'd like to ask a little bit more about how this particular environment blurs the lines between our professional and personal lives. I know we're all acutely aware of that right now in particular. How have you been meeting this new challenge for trying to achieve work-life balance? And I'm also curious what this means for your interactions with your colleagues as we look to maintain personal wellness, but also give support to each other, and what that may look like for your team.
So that's a lot, because there's so much going on, and there really is so much to try to deal with and handle. I definitely struggled with it. It was not something I think any of us could have prepared for. Didn't expect this, didn't anticipate it. We got an email, I think on a Thursday morning, saying that schools were going to be dismissed early. Go and make sure that you're picking up your kids at the bus stops. And my first thought was, okay, that's all right. I can still get this and this and this done, and I'll still be able to get this for dinner, and my mind hadn't quite accepted the fact that this is all different now. This is not normal anymore. And so I really struggled with it. But what I have found is I really had to come to terms with what I can and what I can't do, and really set more realistic expectations and goals. And the expectations part of it, primarily for me, what do I expect from myself? A lot of pressures I was placing on myself. And so I think that was a challenge, just trying to figure out, okay, I can't use the same standards and the same level of norms that I was kind of comparing myself to before. Now it's a totally different ballgame. And then in addition to that, setting expectations for others. So our schedules are completely different now. My second thought, actually, besides, okay, I can still get these things done, my second thought was, okay, I could do this. I can handle this. I just got more time. I'm going to be home now. I don't have to worry about the commute. I don't have to worry about my big chunks of just for work and not being able to multitask, which is not a real thing, right? But no, our days didn't get longer. You didn't get extra hours. In fact, things kind of got smaller because you don't have these big chunks of time that you can dedicate to work or non-work. And so for me, I found setting those expectations, letting others know when you're going to be available, and then sticking to it. I have a very bad habit of checking my email. As soon as I get an email, I get it on my phone. I carry my phone with me everywhere, even around the house, which I probably shouldn't, but I do. And so every time I get an email, I feel like I need to respond immediately. And that's just what I was used to doing. And so that's what I continue to do. But it's very disruptive. And especially when, throughout the day, if I'm not actually in front of my computer and I'm trying to help my daughter with schoolwork or trying to understand an assignment, it's very distracting. And I'm not able to be my best in either case. And so it's more of a discipline, okay, put it down, don't look at it. Or yes, look at it if it's something urgent, maybe because of your role or your responsibilities, you might need to address it. But otherwise, put it away, turn the notifications off if you can, set a little bit more structure around what time is dedicated for what part of your life, because you really can't compartmentalize anymore as much as you did before. Well, you can, but just smaller and smaller chunks. So keeping organized, planning where possible, even if it's just prepping and planning for the next couple of days. And that's not just for work, that's for non-work as well. The groceries, I can't just run to the grocery store anymore. I'm out of milk. I don't necessarily want to just run down to the gas station and grab it. Now I have to make sure I've put together an order. I'm going to have it delivered. When is that going to be? I missed the deadline to change my order. I hope I got milk. So things like that, I have to kind of prep, but I have found it's a lot less stressful if I do that prep work, even if it's just for the next 2 or 3 days ahead. I'm not even trying to think about next week or next month unless it's something big. But so that's more for me and how I've kind of handled it. As far as my team goes and trying to be able to provide them support, my team is amazing. I love them and they're just like me. We've been together for over 10 years. I want to say, how long? 14 years. So we've gotten to know each other quite a bit. And so we don't necessarily need to meet every single day. We use Teams. Teams is actually a really great tool for us, and also Slack. But we personally use Teams also because we had Microsoft consultants with us and that's what they used. And so that's what we were kind of like, okay, I guess we'll just start using Teams. And that's what we stuck with. But just being very understanding, being flexible. They're very understanding and flexible with me. I give right back to them. We're all responsible adults. We all know what we need to do. We know what our deadlines are. And so them trusting me and me trusting them to know how to manage their own time, to be able to get the work done, that's, I think, the biggest thing that has helped me personally. So I try to do that for my team as well. Just make sure that they can take that flexibility. And the last thing is encourage them to take time off. So I think, was it last Friday? There was, I think John Barden held an IT town hall, and he mentioned there's a lot less number of people taking time off, and that's a bad thing. And, I get that most people don't want to take it. I haven't taken that much time off either, so I'm definitely guilty of that. But it's because you have nowhere to go. But at the same time, you actually do need to step away. You do need to get offline. You need to get off the grid. You need to put work away and actually step away. And so I'm going to try to take that advice and try to schedule some time off. But I'm trying to encourage that with the team as well, because they do need to recharge and refresh. So hopefully that answered it.
Definitely. I thank you all for those really robust and helpful answers. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen at this point to moderate some Q&A from you guys, our audience.
Great, thank you. So we do have a couple of questions here, and one of them really relates to what you had just spoken on, Tzu-Tzu. It's the question is, how do you walk away? Is more expected to answer or reply on off hours now that we work from home? How can we truly have boundaries? So I don't know, Tzu-Tzu, if you wanted to add to what you've already added, or if anyone else would like to speak on that topic and has something to say on that.
I can add a little bit to that. I'm definitely one of those, and this was pre-pandemic. As soon as I got an email, like I said, I would just immediately respond to it, no matter what time it was. Right before the pandemic, we were on a project with a very tight deadline, so we were already working nights and weekends. And I think that kind of set the ball rolling, that set the expectation that, yes, you can send me an email and I will respond. I will do it probably as soon as I see it, as soon as I can get to my laptop, if it's something I really need to type out. Otherwise, you got some typos, but I would respond. Now I've definitely found I have to put it away, whether that means you turn off the email notifications on your phone. If it means you just have to be more disciplined about it. You have to really just tell yourself, as much as you really want to and you feel the need to do it, it's okay. You don't have to answer it. You can wait until tomorrow. One thing that I do is I try not to check emails throughout the day, which is really tough because it's constantly, you get the little notifications popping up, or at least I do. I get the notification that this just came in. Okay, I'm gonna go take a look at it. But one piece of advice that I've been given, and also I give now, is block your time. And when you do, to do some dedicated, heads down, focused work, don't check your email. And even if that means shut Outlook down, turn it off, pretend that you're in a meeting, because you wouldn't, if you were in an hour meeting, you wouldn't be checking your email and responding most of the time, right? So kind of treat it that way, and maybe that will help. So I think that was specifically for email, right? I think.
It was, yes, responding in off hours and how do you walk away from it? Does anyone have anything else that they would like to add? Alexandra?
Yeah, I'll speak to that too. So I also just want to echo the turn off the Outlook notifications recommendation. I have Outlook on my phone, but disabling the email notifications has made a huge difference for me, because it means that I have to consciously want to check my email to open the app instead of being told that there is an email. The other thing that I've really struggled with kind of walking away from work at the end of the day when my home is now my workspace, and I think is incredibly hard. One thing that I found useful for me is kind of changing what I am physically doing. So at the end of the day, sometimes what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of exercise at the end of the day. I have kind of a workout area that I ended up setting up in my basement. And so that means I have to change out of the clothes I've been wearing into workout clothes. I work out, I take a shower, and then it's sort of like I have been through this kind of physical change. My mind and body are in a different space, and I find it a lot easier to kind of shut off the work part of my brain, because I'm not in the office anymore. I've gone into a different part of the house. I've kind of done this sort of stress relief, and I found that to be actually a really helpful sort of end of day ritual that kind of marks the difference between work time and non-work time.
Those are great tips. Thank you. Beth, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, first, I love that, Alexandra. I love the routine that you've built in and what that signals, and great too from Tzu-Tzu, just thinking about how we're using Outlook, and with Alexandra, I do the same thing. I don't have the notifications on my phone, so I have to make that willful choice to click on Outlook, and that's very helpful, at least for me, in terms of disconnecting, and just thinking about how we're blocking time. The other thing that I'll offer is I've found my ability to step away, or how I'm step away, has definitely evolved since March. So when March 1st happened, the Poor View Center was highly in demand. Those first few weeks, suddenly instructors who had not taught online before, we were teaching them how to use Zoom and Canvas and all those great things, and really thinking critically about their approaches. So prior to that, had very much been I'm leaving work in my car at the same time every day because I need to go pick up my kids at daycare in the last 15 minutes before it closes. I pick them up, I bring them home, we do dinner, we do bedtime, and that. So they were very much two separate worlds. There was work and there was home, and I prided myself on that. But when March hit and suddenly my kids were home, we were trying to find a babysitter we could bring into the home, everything was thrown up in the air. So I definitely over time gravitated to those smaller compartments within the day versus trying to make two separate buckets within the same day. And that was hard for me to let go of, because I really appreciated having the two phases to my day. But over time is something I think I got better at. Now I'm kind of in a new normal space where my kids have been able to go back to daycare, and that's helped a lot. So I'm trying to redefine that of, okay, while my kids are at daycare, I'm in work mode. Sometimes home can slip in during the day. And if home has to slip in during the day, then when the kids go to bed at night, I kind of bring work back into the picture again. But I'm reminded, I'm thinking about Alexandra's workout tradition. Our transition right now, which isn't going to last long with the time change, is we bring our kids home from daycare, we set up lawn chairs on our driveway, and the kids eat snacks. And we just like decompress together for a half hour and then go into dinner mode. And that's been wonderful for getting out of work mode and getting into parent mode.
Great, thank you. Thank you. It definitely sounds like having some sort of scheduled transition to ease you from one mode to the next really is working for all of you. So we do have another question in the chat box. And this one is, what is your advice to new hires fresh out of school, now working at Yale remotely? It's been disappointing not to interact in person, but trying to keep up my spirits. Do any of you have any advice or suggestions for this question? It's sort of a tough one, I know.
First of all, welcome to Yale. I hope that you're receiving that message, that that's something you're receiving from your coworkers and managers. And if not, jumping into a fly event, but welcome on behalf of Fly. But truly, and I would hope that there is an outreach to you, that there are people who are trying to invite you in, not only professionally, but into those social circles that exist that allow us to be functioning professionals. But if not, to encourage you to advocate for yourself. I think part of how we collaborate well together is by getting to know each other. And that could start from a professional space. Something I've done when starting a new position, when in person, is to say, you know what, I just came to this new position. I'd really love to get to know you and the experience you brought to your position. Can we go run to Blue State, grab a coffee, something like that, and just kind of talk about your career trajectory? I'd love to know more about you. You might consider, if you can find it in you, to extend those invitations in the virtual space. Can you ask someone for that kind of half-hour informational interview to get to know them and to build connections in ways that can both allow you to feel more socially connected, but also open up doors where you begin to understand the expertise that someone else has and how that can inform your work together?
I want to just add to that. So I've been at Yale for just over a year. So I started at Yale in October of 2019. And so when the pandemic hit, I had only been working on campus for a few months and had kind of gotten to the point where I was like, okay, I've sort of started to develop my network on campus, but it didn't feel robust. And I didn't feel like I had like the same kind of network that I had at my previous institutions. So I've been doing what Beth suggested. I've been like seeking out meetings with people whose work seems interesting to me and trying to get a little bit of time on their calendar. And I think, we're all in this virtual world, and I found people have been very kind of generous and kind and interested in chatting, because I think everyone is kind of seeking out that community. So I think don't be shy about that.
Yeah, great, thank you. So we do have one more question that's come up, and so we'll address this question before we move to the poll. And this one seems to be sort of opposite of what the last question, in that I have set I have set boundaries, but it's still hard for them to comprehend. For example, I call you and you don't answer. Yes, I was in a meeting, but don't you see me calling? Yes, I was in a meeting. It takes a lot of repetition and reinforcement. So this was, I'm sorry, I believe that this was a follow-up from the first question. Yes, it was. So this was, okay, so let me start back. Sorry about that. I think my biggest struggle is family that don't understand that just because I am home, it does not mean they can visit. And if they do, that I am at work and cannot tend to them in the same way I normally would because I am working. So it's not always, myself that struggles, but the people around me, especially the kids. I am lucky my smallest is in daycare. However, getting other adults to understand, no, I cannot just sit and chat and have coffee. I'm actually on work time. And then the follow-up to that was, I've set boundaries, but it's still hard for them to comprehend. It takes a lot of repetition and enforcement. Do any of you have advice for that particular situation on how to manage your personal life, that side of it?
I just want to start by acknowledging that that's so hard. It's so hard. And we're thinking in this conversation about how to establish work boundaries. But if we're thinking about the separation between our work life and our personal lives, like the boundary setting has to happen in two directions, and we're in the middle pushing out. And that's really hard. So just to acknowledge that we're in difficult situations, and we all are experiencing that to different degrees. I'll offer that I'm also in a situation where I receive phone calls throughout the day from a family member. My mother actually has some early dementia, and so I'm trying to understand how to set the boundary there, that I'm probably picking up the phone a little bit more than I would if I had been in the workplace, but also wanting to acknowledge her needs too. So it sounds like there are a lot of avenues in terms of coming from the family perspective that have, your family members have needs that they're asking you for. And you've already worked to try to set boundaries, to consider of the needs that are coming in. Are there priorities of needs? Maybe you can't say no to everything, but can you identify which ones are the ones you really can address in the moment versus the ones you can't, and like kind of pick off the ones that you can potentially move into, another time or another space. Certainly not easy, but I guess, I've had to let go of the fact that, as I mentioned before, that I can't truly separate work and life. But I'm also trying to, see some light or gift in the fact that I do have that ebb and flow to my day, as challenging as it may be. So that I don't want to spend too much optimism on a hard situation, but I'm trying to bring the optimist out and see the gift in those flexible moments too.
That's a great answer, Beth. Great, that's great. So I think in the interest of time, we're going to move on to our next poll question. So thank you for your questions. I know working in this context can make it difficult to think about personal goals and professional development. So if you could please share with us, and let's see here. How do we get to the poll question number 2? Do you see it, Victoria? Do you see poll question number 2? I do not. Oh, here we go. Perfect. So for our second poll question, you should see this up on your screen, or what are ways you have been enhancing your own professional development at this time? So we'll give it a few seconds if you could all respond to that. Okay, great. So we're going to close the poll and I'll share the results. And so it looks like we have 45% of our respondents have joined or are attending affinity groups, just like we all are here today. We do have 15% of you are taking classes on LinkedIn Learning, as well as another 15% are using HR and IT training, of which there's been a lot of great training offered by our Human Resources Department. So that's fantastic that people are taking advantage of that. And LinkedIn Learning, I find a lot of really, really interesting courses there. Even if I just need to learn a little something, like I can't figure out how to do something in Excel, I'll go on LinkedIn Learning and look for specific little programming on that. And then we have 26% that responded that they would love to learn more. So I'm so happy that you're here, because that's what we're hopefully doing here. So moving on to our questions. With that in mind, we'll turn back to our panelists. So Beth, how are you working towards your professional goals in this environment? What are you doing to continue your professional development?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that definitely changed for me in terms of professional development in this space is I had submitted a conference proposal back before COVID, and it was supposed to be this in-person 75-minute workshop, and it was accepted. And then we were turned around and told, okay, can you make that into a 30-minute asynchronous video? I was like, oh, that's a little different than what we had planned. So I think professionally, the ability to adapt to new circumstances and to learn a new skill set, to work with my colleague to figure out how to put take that 75-minute session, put it in a 30-minute session, and try to make it interactive, even though it's a video, was a whole new challenge. So I think one way I've tried to grow is to be open to what am I going to learn in this new environment, what new skill sets, and recognizing too, we've often thought about this space, this virtual space, or at least I did coming into it in March, as temporary. Oh, we're going to go home for a few weeks or a few months, or oh, maybe in a few years. I don't want to get too dismal here, but this is a new norm. And what impact will it have for our future work? You know, we talked about the tools we've been using, say, for communication before. Where will they come into play when we are mainly back on campus? Which practices are going to be with us for the long term? So kind of to consider critically the new things that we're adopting. The other thing that I've tried to take advantage of is when I thought about in-person offerings like through HR on campus and budgeting my time on my calendar, I'd say, okay, well, it's an hour and a half event, but I'm at this point on campus and it takes me 15 minutes to get there. So I really need to budget out that hour and a half or that 2 hours to commit to going to that event. So one flexibility that I think is offered by the virtual environment is the ability to show up instantaneously to a meeting with no travel time. And you know, for better or for worse, we can also become overscheduled. But I've been trying to do more of the HR workshops. I've just done the Transgender 101 and creating an inclusive workspace series that's offered by Maria Trumpler and colleagues. So I think there are a lot of great offerings that if you can find that hour that matches in your day to engage, there's really a lot out there.
That's great. Great, thank you. So for Tzu-Tzu, what can you tell us about understanding and utilizing technology to enable our best work in this environment? And are there any resources that you could recommend?
So this one's a tough one because it's very unique to your own situation and your role, what's being asked of you. Of course, you need the basics. You need your laptop, your computer, you need internet access. But then beyond that, it's going to vary depending on what you need and what you use. So like if your day is typically filled with meetings or you're constantly on calls, having a headset that's wireless, that if you need to move around or walk around, you can still do that while still being on the call, unless you're on video, in which case you probably don't want to walk around too much. But I fidget a lot, so I'm sorry if you see me moving around a lot. I'm used to moving around quite a bit. Or having noise canceling headphones, because if you've got a lot of distractions and noise going on in the background, that can be really difficult. Some people like the noise and some people don't. So I'm okay with the noise. I actually prefer it to silence. So I don't like noise canceling headphones, but my husband can't. He can't focus, like he needs it to be silent. And we have a very open floor plan. So there's no place you can really go besides a bedroom or a bathroom for it to be completely quiet. So that would also be something if you need that quiet time. I've also found having your phone, which I know not everyone has necessarily, but having a cellular service is actually also very helpful. We had a lot of storms earlier in the spring and early summer, and we lost power for quite a bit. And so it was actually nice to still be able to have the cell service, be able to communicate out to friends and family and work. And so that was also really important for us. For other resources, the communication, like Beth was saying before, it's important. You know, I know Alexandra's also mentioned it, just Teams, Slack, staying in any of those collaborative type tools, staying in constant contact. There's a lot of good sites out on your.yale.edu. If you go to technology, your.yale.edu/technology, that goes to the ITS website that has a lot of other resources. So if you're having troubles connecting your VPN, say, or you need to open a ticket with the help desk, if you have technology issues, that's really, I think, the first place that you should go is open a ticket or call the help desk. They can definitely point you in the right direction. The other thing I would recommend is stay charged, save often. You never know when something's going to go down, they're going to lose it. But really, it's unique to your own situation. What you find will be useful. Some people can work on a laptop and they don't need a mouse. I can't use a touchpad. Somehow my cursor goes everywhere, so I have to have a mouse. You know, things like that. Find ways to make it a little bit easier on your life because you've got other bigger things to worry about and stress over. So you can find these little tools that will help.
That's a good
do it.
point. Yeah, that's a great point. When we first started in March, I just had my laptop, and in my office, I have 2 screens. I have a independent keyboard, a real mouse, all these things that hooked up to my laptop. And so the first couple of weeks, I was really struggling with the laptop, and I ended up going and picking up a second monitor and a mouse. And a real keyboard, so that you're right. Once you have all of that going for you, you can really focus on your work. So it is really all about having the right tools. And I would like to give a shout out to the IT help desks, because they've been fabulous. I know they were really overwhelmed in the beginning, but they've still done a great job. They've always been there for me and my department, that's for sure. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. So Alexandra, now that most of us have much shorter commutes, we suddenly have this found time in our day. Are you able to use this time to grow and learn, whether it relates directly to your work or your personal well-being? How do you use your previous commuter time?
Sure. So I previously would commute into New Haven on the train. I would take the Hartford line in. And I always liked that time on the train. It was kind of a good time to reset my headspace before and after work. What I'm really valuing right now, though, is that without the time spent commuting, I have more time to rest. This is maybe a boring answer, but I have been sleeping more. And that is actually, I think, really essential for me right now for kind of managing stress. Being well rested makes it a lot easier for me to just feel less anxious, because beyond the pandemic, there's a lot happening right now, as we all know, that is creating anxiety for a lot of us, and I've been feeling it very acutely. So when I've actually been able to sleep well, that kind of makes a world of difference for me. I also want to just recognize, I don't have kids. It's just my husband and I. We don't have elderly relatives who we're caring for. So in a lot of ways, this has not been as difficult for me as I know it has been for a lot of my colleagues, just because there are certain demands on my time that, just aren't there. So I've also been able to kind of reconnect with some of the kind of hobbies that I love to do. So I do a lot of baking, I do a lot of cooking, and beyond just those being things that I like to do, I find that kind of creative time is also something that helps me kind of manage stress and feel better, and kind of remember who I am and kind of feel connected with the things that make me happy, because I think that's really important right now. There's so much that is scary and so much that is uncertain, and so kind of checking in and being able to kind of do those things that make me feel like myself are really, really important.
That's right. Thank you for sharing that. And it is the gift of time is really maybe perhaps the greatest gift of all. So thank you for sharing that. So let's see, Victoria, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have a question. And I also just want to highlight a comment added to in terms of that your own space and noise potentially there, the idea of buying a white noise machine, and that you can obtain them pretty cheaply as another technological tip. So thanks for sharing that. One question I'd like to pose to the panelists is, why do you feel there are so many more Zoom meetings? They eat up your day, then all your work has to be done after hours. So any advice on maybe why this is happening, or strategies for if your day is becoming Zoom meeting full, strategies to help alleviate that?
I mean, I think some of it comes down to the difficulties of communication, and we aren't having those like hallway check-ins that we might otherwise have with our colleagues. And so I've definitely found that like the meetings have proliferated because it's an easy way to actually kind of get information. I've also found that people are understanding if I can't make a meeting, or understanding if I'm like, I'm here, but I'm, I have my camera off and I'm working in the background. So I've tried to be kind of just honest and upfront about that, because sometimes that's just the reality.
Yeah,
Tzu-Tzu.
I was just gonna say, I totally, Alexandra, that's exactly what I'm facing too. There's just being understanding to others. And I think everyone, like you said before, everyone's been really kind. Everyone has been really understanding because everybody is going through this in their own unique way, but everyone is facing the same kind of a challenge. And so one thing that we have found is we kind of designate days or times where you don't have meetings. You know, Fridays, no, we don't schedule meetings unless it's absolutely needed. It's Fridays, you can have to your own self to do whatever you need to do, whether it's to do work stuff or not work stuff. I've told my team I don't schedule anything on Fridays, or try not to. There are a couple of meetings that we have that are standing. So we will meet for half an hour every single day. And at least in that way, whether or not we need to ask questions or just touch base, that seems to work as well, because that kind of lowers how many spontaneous meetings that pop up onto your calendar. So I don't know if that would help too, but designating no meeting days or block the time on your calendar and hope that people respect that you're blocked or that you appear busy. And if you really need that time, decline the meeting, propose a new time. And most people will be very understanding. So far, I haven't met a single person that's like, nope, you've got to be there, except maybe my manager, but yeah, those you probably want to follow.
I'll offer on our team, I appreciate the concentrated work time approach. That's something that our smaller team within the Poor Review Center that Victoria and I are both on has recently adopted, is to carve out a few hours during the week. Mine was actually this morning, it was Wednesday morning, to have that focus work time, as Susan's suggesting, that looks blocked. Then it's nice, it's magical, right? It's blocked and then people aren't scheduling over that time. And I was able to do some concentrated writing this morning, which was fantastic. It's a project that's been lingering for me and I made significant progress and it felt great. So that was really helpful. I also want to recognize with meetings, though, that there is a power dynamic, right? So you may or may not be in a position to choose either to have the meeting in the first place or what's happening during that meeting. So I guess what I would offer is, if you're in a position where of power to be the one scheduling that meeting, to be the manager, to think critically about that time and what are you hoping to accomplish? What are the goals? Have they been articulated? Can you work together to make progress during that time? And if you aren't in a position of power to kind of make those decisions, are there ways that you can ask questions of those who are making those decisions? Of, I noticed that meeting kind of was scheduled for 2 hours. I wonder if we could have accomplished the same amount of work in an hour, knowing that people have different demands on their time after, or have a daycare pickup, or or whatever it may be. But to try to use questions to raise awareness about both, like, if we should have a meeting in the first place, is there an alternative to that? And then also what we're hoping to accomplish together to make sure, that once allows time for discussion, but is also efficient toward reaching the goals of the team.
Thank you all for those great responses and strategies. And we don't have another question in the chat, but I do want to just highlight the comments just posed about grieving the loss of the life that you used to have, but in terms of acknowledging that and coming to terms with that, to reframe the new normal and to be open to change in that way. That really speaks to me personally, so I just wanted to highlight it for a moment. In our final segment here, I'm going to launch one more poll question, and we have a few more prepared questions, but again, wanting to note that please, any questions you'd like to have our panelists respond to, you can populate those in the Q&A or chat. I'm going to launch this last poll question. We're curious about your own work environment for those of you working virtually from home. And right now, you should see a poll question highlighted that says, do you work in a separate space, like an office or extra room? Or are you working in some kind of multi-purpose space, which is a kind way of saying maybe you're working in the kitchen, or you might be sharing a designated office space, but it is shared with other members of your family or community in your home. I'll give you a little bit longer to respond to this question here. All right, thank you for your responses so far. Let me go ahead and share the results here. Okay, so you can see from our results that 71% of you are working in some kind of multi-purpose space, either one that is used for more than just work or perhaps sharing with others. And some of you, 32% do in fact have a designated space for work, possibly an office or other closed off space. So thank you for sharing that perspective, because it really moves us more into our final segment here, where we're talking more about habits as well as preparing for when things don't go as beautifully as you'd like, maybe for the day or for that meeting. So I'm going to turn to you once more and ask you a little bit about the way you described batching your time and thinking about your time in that way. That this is also what experts recommend, that having a workday routine and building blocks of time, also with built-in breaks. Can you give us a little more detail, if you're willing, about how you create a kind of predictable as possible rhythm so that you stay motivated and stay on task throughout the day in this kind of very amorphous environment?
It's definitely got no shape or structure to it. And so we kind of have to stuff it and shape it the way that we can in the spaces that we can. And so I have a daughter. She's just turned 9 on Sunday. She just turned 9. And so she has school that starts, which is great that she's been going back to school. She's full-time remote, so she's actually here. And we decided that just because we don't want to have to worry about drop-offs and pickups and what would happen if the school's closed. And I don't like too many variables. I'm okay with some, but I'm trying to cut out as many as I can. So with her, it's actually been a little bit easier to try to structure the day, because I structure it around her schedule, because the school has a set schedule. And so I spend the morning with her, get her breakfast, get her ready for school. And then when she goes to school, I start my work. And so she actually goes until 1 o'clock. And so during that time, that is my more dedicated and focused time for work. And sometimes I can't do all work. Sometimes I do have to bring in a little non-work. One thing that I have found really helps me is to use Outlook and to use the calendar feature and function and block that time. Like actually put a meeting on my time. And I can mark it as not busy, so that if somebody really does need to schedule a meeting, they can do so during that time. But at least for me, a notification will pop up and say, okay, now's the time to work on this document, or now's the time to go work on that report. And it kind of reminds me, okay, this is what I was planning on doing for this hour or for this half hour. And I'll put things on there that aren't work related as well, because it's just a reminder. And because I am in front of my computer most of the time, or I have my phone with me where the notifications will pop up, it will tell me, okay, did you finalize your Peapod order, because it's coming tomorrow. There have been many times that I missed that, and so that's why I put a notification on now. I also try to keep things routine in the sense of most of our Peapod orders come on Fridays. The one time that I switched it up because we were out of milk, I missed finalizing it and finalizing the order, and I had put milk, but I had forgotten a couple of other things. And so just even throwing something onto the calendar, just that you know a notification will pop up, even just that quick little reminder, make sure that it's not busy. If you want to make sure it's not blocked time, I think for me that has really helped to kind of schedule my time, even if it's not set in stone. And so there is a block between 3 to 5 that says Eva, because that's for my daughter. And that's to try to help her make sure that she's followed up on all of her homework. Has she completed all the assignments that were due today? Kind of catch up with her, take a snack break, play a little Minecraft, whatever we want to do, for that hour. I've got it scheduled in there. And also that's dedicated time that I know, and others know now, that, you can't schedule a meeting with me at 3, because that is time that I am doing something else. And for me, routine felt difficult to achieve because there was no true routine. I mean, we were going day to day, week to week, month to month, not knowing what are we doing, what's school doing, are we going back to work, are we not going back to work, when can we safely go and start visiting people? You didn't know. And so I had to learn to accept that it's okay to not have everything planned out, but when you do and you don't want to forget, just throw it on the calendar, or use your phone and put an alarm on your phone, like at 2 o'clock. Don't forget to, preheat the oven because you're doing something, like little things. I have so many alarms on my phone. I have to delete some of them, but use those tools, because you're near them almost all the time, which you really shouldn't be. But if you are during the day, you've got to use it. So that's what I do. And besides the whole email thing, that's really the only other thing that I would highly suggest and recommend. Like Alexandra was saying, turn off the email notifications. Don't even be bothered with them.
Thank you
So
so
I
much.
just want to quickly add that I feel like you've seen my Outlook calendar. I feel very clean because it's the exact same thing that I have my meetings, but I use it not only for time management, but also as my to-do list. So
Yes,
I have those
absolutely.
not busy things and, oh, I got a meeting scheduled there. Well, I'm going to take that hour and make sure I do that on Friday instead, but it allows me to hopefully not drop the ball. And I also have a non-work reminder for this afternoon to make sure I text our contractor. So, right,
Yes,
so those things get mixed in,
have
so we can
to.
let those things slip through the cracks. Absolutely.
Exactly. And because you're right in front of your computer, you're going to see it. And it's right there. It's all in one place. You don't have to worry about, did I put it in my planner? Did I put it on my checklist? You know, whatever works for you. And not everybody is a computer or phone person. And so if it means putting a checklist together because it's a whole lot easier, then you do that. But write it down so that you don't forget. And yeah, definitely. I've also kind of gone to the other end, and I've color coded my appointments just because it is a whole lot easier. When I see purple, I know that's just for me. When it's green, I know it has to do with this client. When it's blue, I know it's that client. So I kind of have that in going as well, but that could be going a little overboard. But it works for me. So
Awesome. Thank you both for those strategies and advice. Fully recognizing that we're moving towards the end of our time here, I want to throw out one final question for any panelists to answer. But in advance, since some may need to leave right at 1, I want to thank everyone who attended today and our panelists. I'll do so again for those who are staying on for this final question. But I'd like to ask from you all's experiences in terms of when things fail, when the technology doesn't work, do you have any advice for what to do in the moment and when something isn't going the right way? And I realize some of that may simply be setup. If you're in a shared space, figuring out ways to make sure you can still get done what you need to get done, or thinking about how you would react. But any advice about how to respond or prepare for when the technology, which is so essential right now, doesn't work?
I think it's important to expect imperfections. This is going to seem unrelated, but I promise I'll come back to it. I was told when I was getting married to expect at least 5 things would go wrong on my wedding day. And if you go in with that expectation, it was a pretty great day. Yeah, a couple things went a little wrong, but hey, I still got married. It was still a fantastic day, right? We are in a new environment. We're all learning it together. Most likely, if you're working at Yale, this is not the way you traditionally worked. So to try to set your threshold that there will be some hiccups, there will be some things that go wrong. I think that helps versus expecting that everything will go off without a hitch. And also what's been helpful for me is just to keep perspective that absolutely, like, I don't love the fact that one of the first workshops I ran in March, my voice was so tinny because the fan kept going off on my laptop, right? But is it the end of the world? I mean, at the end of the day, we are all living amidst a global pandemic, against a time of thinking about racial injustice, about so many things that are going on in the world, right? So at the end of the day, the fact my fan was loud is peanuts. So if that, to have those moments of perspective that at the end of the day, I'm really grateful to work at Yale. I'm really grateful to have such fantastic colleagues and collaborators. And we're going to learn together. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn together.
yeah, I would definitely second that. And the first thing I would say, besides don't panic, would be to breathe. It's okay. You're not the first person this is going to happen to, and you're not going to be the last person. It's probably happened to every single person that you're on the Zoom call with. So, and if it's not, it will happen to them. And so everyone understands, and you're right, we're all in this. We're facing the same challenges, unique challenges, but we're all being challenged. And so just breathe. It'll be okay. It's not the end of the world. 5 things going wrong on your wedding day, that's not so bad.
And I'll think, I love both of those responses, and I'll also just add that sorry, I completely forgot what I was about to say. See, things go wrong. I think, so what I was going to say was, you can prepare as much as you can, but then there are so many things that are out of our control. That storm that came in the summer that knocked off power for a huge chunk of people was completely outside of our control. I've had big Zoom meetings where somebody's internet just doesn't work. That's completely outside of our control. So you can you can prepare, but there's only so much that you can do. And so I think being able to just like let go a little bit is fine. And everyone is in this weird situation. Everyone's feeling a lot of stress. And I think everyone is also kind of understanding of the fact that there's a lot happening right now that we can't control for.
Yeah, absolutely. I would second that. And my manager always says, hope for the best, plan for the worst, but you can't plan for every worst possible scenario. So like that curtain that's there, that fell down during a Zoom meeting that I was on because my daughter was playing with a cat and the whole thing came crashing down. And I think just having a sense of humor about it, she was fine, cat was fine, curtains, yeah. But I think having a sense of humor throughout the whole thing is what's going to get us through, and just being understanding.
I love all of those responses. Thank you. They're all great. And especially the tip about on your wedding day, plan for 5, right? And then if only 2 or 3 things go wrong, then hey, it's a win.
So I, again, recognizing we're at past our time here, we have the Zoom room reserved for a little bit longer. If anyone wants to pose any further questions or comments, we welcome them in the chat or Q&A section. But let me first, again, thank Fly and our co-sponsors, as well as our panelists here today, and our audience for being here, offering your comments, your questions, and listening to some of your colleagues and about the same or similar challenges they've been facing, and hopefully some ideas for how, since it looks like for some of us this is going to be a longer term situation, how to think about it and how to prepare for it. And not saying that there needs to be a silver lining, but how to reframe, as one of the audience members spoke about, to acknowledge what's going on, but reframe and think about what this now entails for us and how we continue to make progress and support each other.
Great. Thank you, Victoria. And thank you to our panelists. We really appreciate all of your insight and sharing your stories and your tips. And thank you to our sponsors.
Thank you. While we're waiting, I also thought of something else for technology. If you don't have a second monitor, or if you can't get one, sometimes a TV will work if it has an HDMI connector. So, okay, pardon the mess. That is my second monitor. It's a TV. Because I don't have a second monitor. But for those times when you need something side by side, even a TV will work. So I just unplug it from like the Xbox, and then I plug it into my laptop. And
that's smart.
So sometimes you might just need an adapter.
That's great.
Thank you. That's a great tip. The other hack that I've done in times that I need to multitask at home is if I'm attending a webinar but not needing to actively participate. There have been times I've actually broadcast it to my TV, so I can be actively doing something with my hands in the room, but still being able to be attentive and have my notebook on my side. So throwing out there that TVs are multi-purpose in this environment.
Yes, and even your phone. You can actually get Zoom or Teams on your phone. So if that's even easier to be able to take that and walk around. There have been a couple of times I've been on calls and people are sitting outside. I'm like, how'd you do that? How did you get Wi-Fi out there? And it's no, they're on their phone. They're sitting outside. So thinking, yeah, I should probably do that. It would get me outside, get some fresh air.
Yeah. Thanks as well for sharing your workspace there, Tzu-Tzu. I'm curious for the rest of you if there's anything that you advise. This is a question we didn't get to of setting up your workspace, whether it's a designated separate room or a shared one. If you have any advice there, I'm guessing that some of the audience might be curious.
So I do have a separate workspace. I have a second monitor that is on a milk crate that holds it up high enough. The one thing that I invested in when we went remote is I bought a split keyboard, which is so good. It just like kind of helps me keep my shoulders back, and it's the best thing. I love it.
I'll offer that my workspace has evolved over time, similarly to what was shared before. In March, I grabbed my laptop, and that was kind of a few like key notebooks and books, and that was about it. I was able to later on acquire some of the other things that I'd left behind. So I do have like a job or speaker for the workshops we run, and I was able to grab my second monitor and a few things like that from my desk. That's been incredibly helpful. What's less as helpful is the fact that you may have noticed I'm presenting from a bedroom, which is not a defined office space. It is a multi-purpose space. My husband and I are both working from home. We are fortunate to have an office space, but he's also of the quiet mentality that was described by others before. So he's downstairs in the office, and then I've made this into a pseudo desk space. So we're definitely privileged that we can be in two separate spaces, and we're kind of trying to configure it over time and learn as we go.
Yeah, definitely privileged. I have good friends of mine live in the city, live in Manhattan, and they're both working from home, and both of their children are in school remotely in a very small 2-bedroom apartment. It's tough. So we're for those of us that have a little bit more space, we're definitely fortunate, regardless of what that space looks like. If you're not sharing it with your spouse and 2 children, you're winning. So do we have any other questions in the chat? I don't see any other questions in the chat.
We don't. So I think we're all set. Thank you all for participating, for being such vibrant panelists and reacting on the fly to a lot of these questions. There were some good ones in there, but also some that you could tell that our audience was very much relating to a lot of the situations that you highlighted. I'm also seeing in the chat further comments on, setting up that space. Yep. The curtain that is the backdrop of much of our work time. Thanks for sharing that, Natasha. All right, I think, Lauren, unless anything else, I think we're all set. Okay, all right, so I think we're good to go. Thank you again, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we did. Really, it was wonderful hearing from all of you, and we really do appreciate your insight and your tips and sharing your stories. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.